waiting room while you kick off, if you like, if you're happy with that. Everybody, if, as I say, for those of you who've just joined, welcome to the WUN event. I'll be managing it from a Zoom perspective today. All we ask is that you keep yourself muted while the speaker is talking. There will be an opportunity to unmute and there'll be a Q&A. We also will be doing a breakout session today as well. So obviously we would like you to unmute at that point and talk to one another, and where possible, if you can put your cameras on as well, because it's really lovely for everybody to see everybody else's faces when they're talking as well. Any issues with technology, you can message me in the messaging section you'll find on your floating toolbar. If you message directly to me rather than everybody else, if it's a technical issue, but you can message everybody if you've got a question. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca.
Hello everyone, can everyone hear me? Yeah, I'm assuming yes. Okay, great. So welcome to the monthly One for All webinar. So I think you'll see we've done a few changes this month. So firstly, we've changed the slot of the normal One for All session from the day to the evening, because I think working days are normalizing again, and we've had feedback that an evening slot is easier. And today the focus of the session will be new nuclear, and specifically the Sizewell C project, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So I think, as Hayley said, please ensure you're on mute, but there will be opportunities to do a Q&A as we go through the presentation and afterwards, so please use the chat function to that, and I'll be managing questions throughout. As you can see from the agenda, what we'd like to start off with today, before we get to our main event and Julia Pyke, is to do some short breakout sessions, which will be managed by Hayley, so we can just get a bit of an insight for future events on why people are signing up for the events, and to get some insight on the topics that interest people. So just a bit going back to the speaker today, Julia Pyke, who's the Sizewell C Director of Financing. So people might have heard a little bit about a small project that EDF's involved in called HPC. So this will be Britain's, the UK's first nuclear power station for 20 years, very much central to Britain's green recovery, providing 25,000 employment opportunities. But we are also very focused at EDF on our next adventure of Sizewell C, and that will be a topic we go into later. But before we do, I think, Hayley, we can move to the breakouts.
I'll put the questions that we've also put in the chat function, so you can see what those are. They are, so everybody can see those. I will open all the rooms now. You'll have a screen pop up. We'll invite you to join a new room. We're going to be in the room for sort of 8 or 10 minutes, and I will give you a 60-second warning before the rooms close, so you can wrap up your conversations.
Thank you.
Hi there, Canthy, Sabrina. You've just joined as everyone's gone to breakout rooms. I'm going to see if I can get you into a breakout room, so you can join the conversations that the others are in at the moment.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Hello.
Sorry, Hayley, we missed the questions, but Astrid actually remembers them, so
okay.
we are uninviting you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's like Madam Popoff. You're probably not old
Yeah.
enough to. Yeah, you are. Okay.
Yeah. What's Madam Popoff?
It's a children's program where she just used to zip off.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Hayley, can you hear me? Hello, Hayley, if you can hear me, everyone's in breakout rooms at the moment. They're just having a chat before we go into the presentation. I'm going to put up a screen pop on your screen to allow you to join a breakout room so you can join in.
Can you hear me, Hayley?
I can now.
Hi, sorry, I was just talking to myself. I'm just working on some work in the background, so I might be better off to just wait till people come back.
Okay, they won't be long actually. There'll be
Yeah, no
only a few
problem.
minutes.
I've got
Okay,
some stuff I'm finishing off, so.
okay.
Hayley, is it just you and I at the moment?
Yes.
While I've got you, I've been working with some ladies from EDF and also from EON around digital transformation. We've been doing some really quite neat stuff around planning. If you're ever looking for some speakers, I think it could be really interesting to the group.
Yeah, well, but if you want to drop me an email, Hayley, with what you talk about and the interest, we're always looking for interesting speakers. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right,
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Hi, Lynn. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Hi, Lynn. They're in breakout rooms at the moment. They're due to come back in about a minute. I can put you into a breakout room if you want, or you can wait a minute and then they'll join back on the main screen.
I can just join back on the main screen. What have I missed? Sorry about that. I don't know why the link wasn't working.
No, we're just doing something slightly differently. So you've not really missed much. We just gave people an opportunity to do a bit of networking and to we asked 2 questions. Why did they decide to sign up for today's One for All, and what is about the topic that interests you? So they've gone into breakout rooms. There's 4 or 5 people in a room, and they're going to be back here in 1 minute.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just listen in and then sort of join it.
Okay. Hello all, welcome back. They'll all start popping back in now. Good conversation.
Yeah, great. The breakout rooms work really well. It's nice to kind of have that little bit of networking before we kick off.
I'm just going to move into the kitchen because I have to actually cook, but I'm listening to everything.
It's a good job we can't smell then, isn't it? Because it might make us all a bit jealous. I'm feeling rather hungry myself.
I hope so.
So the breakout room at the start was a really good idea. Well done.
That's really good, because I'm going to ask that question in a poll in the end, but that's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And it seems like it was a positive with the time, the new time. So.
That's everybody back, Rebecca.
Great. Okay, so I'll now hand over to Julia. So just as a short intro, I think I've already mentioned Julia is Director of Financing, a small project that EDF is backing in the UK. But before that, has a long and esteemed history as a lawyer, but very much focused on the energy sector. So has really got a huge amount of experience across the different areas of energy, and particularly, you know, we just talked before, very well versed with the renewables sector as much as nuclear. And yeah, I'm sure we'll give a very interesting perspective behind the need for Sizewell C as part of the net zero ambitions of the UK. So Julia, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So, and thanks to the network for inviting me to speak about my very favourite topic, Sizewell C. So, as Rebecca said, I spent most of my career as a lawyer. I was the head of power at Herbert Smith Freehills, and at Herbert Smith I worked on projects right across the power sector, so wind, solar, thermal, and of course, and the Swansea Bay tidal lagoon, and of course, Hinkley Point C. And the reason I decided to change career and come to do project development directly is that it took us 10 years to get through the paper process for Hinkley Point C. People talk about Hinkley being late. It's not late, it's actually on time. It's met all of its construction milestones on time since it started construction. But it took 10 years to get the paperwork done, and it took so long, and there was so much detailed and good thinking that went in, that it seems a huge shame not to make use of that. So the other thing I'd say before I start is that EDF has most forms of generating technology. So EDF, as I'm sure you know, has a renewables business. It has wind, it has solar. In France, it has a lot of hydro. It has the UK's currently, I think, still largest battery storage at West Burton. And it still has a gas plant, and it has nuclear, and it spends, I think, £2 million a day on research and development. So when EDF says that it thinks that we need more nuclear in the mix, at least to replace the current nuclear that's going offline in the 2020s, it's not saying so from a position of sort of single focus. It's saying so from a position of really extensive experience right across the generating technologies. So if we look at this first slide, why are we saying Sizewell C doing the power of good for Britain? Apart from the fact that it's quite a catchy slogan. And obviously the wording is based on the idea that we make power, that is our product. And everybody thinks of nuclear power making grid scale electricity, which we do. But to make grid scale electricity, we only actually use about 30% of the heat that the power station produces. There's an enormous untapped resource of clean zero carbon heat in the power station. So with Sizewell C, we intend to do what a lot of other countries already do, which is to make sure we can take out that otherwise wasted heat and use it to pipe it for industrial process, for district heating, maybe cooling data centres, etc., and make sure we make the absolutely most use of the asset that we can, as well as, of course, of providing grid-scale electricity. And then another reason that we've used the word power is that with these huge projects and right across the energy industry, we have the power collectively to make a really big difference to levelling up agendas. You know, the nuclear industry hasn't traditionally spent much of its time or energy in marketing itself. And it in fact has the most fantastic record in taking in apprentices and giving people careers rather than just minimum wage jobs. You know, the two people at the top of Hinkley Point C both came into what was then the CEGB as 16-year-old apprentices. And through the nuclear industry, they've risen so that they're running Europe's largest construction project at the moment. And it's a similar story at Sizewell B. So we have a huge amount of power to do a lot of good. And this is particularly resident in this post-COVID environment where we all really need to do what we can to make sure there are opportunities for young people who are just starting off their careers and are maybe looking at the world with less optimism than was available when we were all starting off our own careers. So could we look at the next slide, please? So you'll see on the question, where are we? I've got a slide of a long and winding road. So doing mega projects in the UK is a long and winding road. We are waiting, as I'm sure is everybody on this call, for the government's white paper on energy. So obviously we were all hoping to see it around a year ago. And since then, we've had, I think, 2 changes of Secretary of State and Chancellor. We're very much hoping to see the white paper in the autumn. And we're very much hoping that the autumn is the traditional season of autumn in the UK. So where we are is that we expect the white paper to give much more clarity about what the government thinks the energy mix should be for the UK. Our own view is that we agree with the Committee on Climate Change. We need a huge expansion of offshore wind and solar. We think there is a need to develop carbon capture and storage. We believe that in line with the CCC recommendations, the UK needs around about 40% firm low carbon power. Today, the nuclear is the only proven scalable way of making low carbon firm power. Other technologies absolutely will develop. As I said, EDF is at the forefront of R&D, but we definitely need some more nuclear. And this is what Sizewell C is offering to the UK. So can we move on to the next slide? So as everybody knows, the Hinkley Point, or probably knows, Hinkley Point C is actually the first new nuclear power station in the UK for a generation. So the last nuclear power station built was Sizewell B, which turned on in, I think, 1995. And then, so what Hinkley has had to do is to establish an approved design in the UK for nuclear, and it's had to engage with the supply chain in the UK who are learning to build nuclear for the first time in a generation. And Hinkley is putting 14 billion into the UK economy during the construction period. We promised to create 25,000 job opportunities, of which I think we're now well over 10,000. We promised to create 1,000 apprenticeships. I think we are on something like 684 fourth apprenticeship created. And we promised to put 4 billion into the regional economy of the southwest of England. And so far, we're, I think, 4 to 5 years ahead of target, and we've put in so far 1.7 billion. So from these massive numbers, you can see the sort of impact that a nuclear power station project can have on the region in which it's located. So can we go on to the next slide, please? But we don't only have an impact on the region of the power station. Hinkley has, I think, 2,500 UK suppliers, and these suppliers are all over the UK. So you can see from the large orange blobs that a lot of suppliers are in the southwest, a lot of the suppliers are in the southeast, and we have clusters of suppliers throughout the north and in Scotland, and we've just put a few examples on there. And Hinkley has got 64% of its construction contracts going to the UK, and for Sizewell we aim to achieve at least 70% UK content in construction. And in operation, power stations are operated by a team of power stations of this size are operated with a team of around 900 highly skilled, highly paid people, and those people will all be based in the UK. And the big question around can we get to nearly 100% UK content in operation depends on whether or not we can get the whole fuel chain moved into the UK. If we do get the whole fuel chain moved into the UK, we are even looking at using existing UK uranium stocks rather than using freshly mined uranium. And that would put us up pretty close to 100% in operations. And a power station, of a UK EPR power station, has a design life of 60 years. The first UK EPR, the first EPR to come online is a joint venture between EDF and CGN. It's in Taishan in China. It's the top performing nuclear power station in the world. And a nuclear power station takes 900 million tons of carbon out of the atmosphere in comparison with CCGT. So it's doing a great job, and it's so far performing very well. And another interesting fact about Taishan is that it's actually operating very flexibly. People often worry about how does nuclear fit into the much more flexible system of the future, and Taishan is demonstrating great technological flexibility in terms of the ability to ramp the station up and down. And I'll come on to how we can make nuclear operate more flexibly in other ways in a few slides' time. So we move on to the next slide. So where we are with Sizewell is that we've done 8 years of consultation in the local community, and we've submitted the development consent order along with all the environmental consent applications and the application for nuclear site license. So this puts us into an 18-month process where the consents are all examined. And we have formed a consortium with a lot of UK nuclear companies. You can see a lot of logos there on the right-hand side of the slide. And these companies are all in a consortium with us to look collectively at how can we do our best to level up, to increase UK content, to talk to the government about what it really means about the timing of making decisions. You know, what happens to the workforce of Laing O'Rourke if we don't go ahead with Sizewell reasonably quickly after Hinkley, for example. Around 25% of Laing O'Rourke's workforce is employed on Hinkley, and those people we are hoping will be able to move on to Sizewell in 2022. And from this side, you can also see sort of how interlinked things are. You know, the government's very rightly concerned about the health of the UK construction sector. We've seen companies like Carillion go under, and companies like Laing O'Rourke, which actually directly employ their workforce rather than contract them all, which is a much more common model for the construction industry. It can be a great engine for driving increased skills and increased productivity in the construction supply chain. And so we're also, through this consortium, trying to demonstrate how, through seeing a pipeline, through working together, we can get things to work much better for the benefit of everybody. In terms of how does the government intend to finance new nuclear, the answer is we are waiting for the government's conclusions on the funding model. It consulted, I think about this time last year, on moving away from a contract for difference model, which it obviously used for Hinkley, to a regulated asset-based model, much more like the model used for national grid transmission assets, and Scottish and Southern transmission assets, and the water industry. And the reason that it would do this, if it does make this decision, is that in a nuclear project, the majority cost to consumers is the cost of money, and that's particularly the case because of the long construction period. So of the £92.50 for the Hinkley strike price, only £11 represents the cost of construction, £19.50 represents the cost of operations, and the rest of it is the cost of money. So if you can get the cost of money down by not allowing interest to roll up over the entire construction period, and by getting the risk cost of the money down, then we can do a much better deal for consumers. And the risk cost of the money can come down in two ways. One is because we're reducing the construction risk by making a direct copy of Hinkley Point C. So we'll be building the exact same configuration as Hinkley. And that will mean that we know what quantities of equipment, cable, aggregate, steel, etc. that we need. So there's much less cost overrun risk on quantities. That's around about half the construction cost. And there's an experienced team who's built that exact design, moving on to build Sizewell. We can see the sort of benefits you get from fleet build at Hinkley itself, where we have 2 units. So unit 2 is showing improvements in productivity of the order of 45% more steel installed in the same time as was installed for unit 1, installing huge pieces of equipment 30–40% faster. And you can see that if we're able to treat Sizewell effectively as Hinkley Unit 3 with the same design and the same supervisory workforce, obviously not literally the same workforce, there'll be plenty of opportunities for companies in Suffolk, then you can see that we can make a real improvement in the UK's productivity record, as well as deliver the power station much more cheaply. So can we move on to the next slide? We've also started looking at Moorside. So depending on how much nuclear does the government want in the mix. Hinkley is 3.2 gigawatts. The Energy Systems Catapult, I think, recently suggested that around about 10 gigawatts of gigawatt scale nuclear is a low or no regrets decision. The low or no depending on whether or not we're able to demonstrate cost reduction, which we're confident that we can. So Hinkley's 3.2, Sizewell C would also be 3.2. If we were to build a further pair of UK EPRs, that would be a further 3.2. And plus we have Sizewell B, which we expect to get a life extension and so to carry on operating until around about 2050. But all of the rest of the nuclear in the UK is going to turn off over the 2020s because it was built in the 1970s and 1980s and it's reached the end of its life. It's not really possible to life extend it any further. So today, the nuclear fleet puts out round about 20% of the UK's electricity, and that's all going to turn off except Sizewell B, which makes around about 3%. Hinkley will come along and provide back in 7, taking us back up to 10. And if you look at a period of time, as we've just experienced through June and July, where there's been very low wind, not just in the UK, but also quite widely across Europe on the majority of days in June and July, then you can see why we need nuclear to be available and to continue to be available. Because what we've actually been doing in June and July in a pandemic with an exceptional economic downturn is making 40 to 50% of our electricity by burning gas. So if we move on to, so Moorside, what is Moorside? Moorside is a site in Cumbria, and it's where we would build a further copy of Hinkley Point C. And again, we formed a consortium with a lot of companies in the UK nuclear industry to explore building not just UK EPRs, but also hosting small modular reactors and advanced modular reactors. We're very keen to see the nuclear sector develop, and we're very keen to see new technologies come online. And we're hoping to work with the offshore wind industry and to develop a clean energy hub in the northwest. So if we move on to the next slide. And we say, well, what more can we offer the UK? This is a particularly grim picture of Lowestoft railway station. And the point of including this picture is to say that a lot of our power stations are located in places where there isn't a huge amount of alternative skilled work. And we can do a lot to improve economic opportunities for people, and in particular for young people in those areas. So we move on to the next slide. So what do we mean when we say nuclear power can be an energy hub? What we mean is that as well as making grid scale electricity, we want to use the heat So we're interested in hydrogen electrolysis. We're really interested in working with the offshore wind industry. So Sizewell C has the electricity for Greater Gavard and for Galliford coming in onto the same beach. If it were possible for us to work together to have a hydrogen electrolysis plant which took a constant base load from nuclear, maybe with some heat assistance, and also took in the intermittent power from those two wind farms, that looks like a great outcome for consumers. We are looking at direct air capture. We're looking at storage. We're looking at data center cooling, and we're looking at how can we use hydrogen? How can we actually really join up our thinking with people like the local ports? So both ABP with Lowestoft and Ipswich are near, as are Felixstowe and Harwich container ports. So how can we join up our thinking so that we can really make a big difference across sectors beyond the electricity generation sector? If we can move on to the next slide. We know that one of the reasons nuclear finds it difficult to really seize public imagination enthusiastically is because it takes a long time to build. And so making electricity and getting heat from Sizewell C will be not within this electoral cycle. And also we're very keen to see what nuclear can do. And so we're looking at putting hydrogen and direct air capture demo plants powered by Sizewell B, so with completely clean power, and using the hydrogen to start exploring the hydrogen market in the east of England. It will be a small scale thing, but it will be scalable. So at one level, we could use the hydrogen only to make sure our own construction is much more sustainable by having hydrogen powered site buses, hydrogen construction vehicles. We could also supply hydrogen to the ports who are using hydrogen, very keen to use hydrogen powered port vehicles. And as I said, we could start exploring the use of and supply of hydrogen for clean shipping. Again, joining up with the offshore wind industry, when we've talked to people like the Bay's Clean Maritime team, they're very keen that the offshore wind industry itself looks at, at the carbon footprint of the shipping to and from the construction and maintenance of the wind farms, and maybe that's somewhere else where we could all join up. And we've been looking at policy issues around free ports. For free ports to succeed in creating competitive manufacture, they're going to need a lot of clean, stable heat and power. So we've been looking at how can we join up. So if we move on to the next slide. We've also been working with the community in the town which is nearest to the power station at Sizewell C, which is a town called Leiston. It's a town of around 5,000 people. It had an agricultural implements factory which closed at some point, I think during the 1980s, and since then Leiston has fallen on slightly hard times, and a lot of people in Leiston have to travel quite a long way to work. We're working with the district council, the county council and the town council to engineer a route to net zero. And so this is quite an interesting social experiment. I think I've quite often heard Kwasi Kwarteng make speeches along the lines of, we have all the technology we need today to reach net zero. That's not to say we shouldn't also develop new technologies. We should and are. But the real issue is what's going to be socially acceptable. What experiences will people accept which are less carbon intensive than current experiences? And so we are running it a bit like Dragon's Den, in which the community are the dragons and we come forward with ideas which will help Leiston on its route to net zero, and the community chooses which of those ideas are implemented. So we're working closely with Atkins, who have written several great reports, one of them entitled Engineering Net Zero, with Oppergy, who are a great energy consultancy firm in the east of England and really able to link us up well. And with Carbon 4 actually came up with the carbon accounting rules for France, and they've done some very interesting work on how you can use the concept of carbon offsetting, persuading companies to pay what they would otherwise pay for carbon offsetting into a local project like Leiston Net Zero, so that we can make real progress with engineering net zero for that town. EDF, as you probably know, has businesses like Pod Point and Ubertricity focused on EV charging, and so we can work with a lot of people in our own EDF group, with the EDF customers group, who have a lot of smart technology, to offer the community a selection of ways of lowering the carbon emissions of Leiston, and seeing which of them are popular with people in the town. So what we hope to create is a replicable blueprint for communities of a similar nature. So towns and otherwise rural areas where there's quite a heavy transport requirement, and make it available for replication around social acceptability. So if I stop talking and let people answer some questions, that's probably good.
Great, Julia. Actually, there's been a lot of questions put in the chat, so I'll try to make sure I do them justice. One from Joe Butlin on heat. So commenting, it's a great idea, but knowing Suffolk well, where can it be reused? Can it be transported as hot water? So can you explain a bit about the heat opportunity?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So based on the experience of other countries, it's possible to pump the heat economically about 80 kilometres. So other countries which have basically valued heat much more highly than the UK has, like Russia and Finland, this is what they do. They do use nuclear already for low carbon heating. And so we're not looking at pumping at 80 kilometres, but could we, in theory, for example, do a deal with a BT data centre or with British Sugar, which are in the county, but obviously not immediately adjacent to the power station? The answer is yes. I mean, we're very conscious of the Suffolk coast and of tourism, and it's really important to make clear that we can run private wires and we can pump heat back from the coast into more suitable locations from a planning perspective.
Okay, great. A question from Hayley about just simply hearing the sheer scale of this project. How on earth do you plan it? How do you forecast the costs? And how do you corroborate these costs with suppliers? Do you have any insight into what's required to control such a project as this?
Well, we do have a lot of insight into that. I'm not claiming all of this for myself, obviously, but we have a large team because we're doing Hinkley. So we have something which we can copy, and we have a team of people who are living this on a daily basis. So I was part of the team putting Hinkley together. A lot of the people involved in the planning of Sizewell are the team who planned Hinkley. So we do have a lot of experience. So I would be the first to say it is complicated and it is at huge scale, but ultimately things can be broken down into manageable chunks and delivered.
A question from Sabrina about how you deal, I guess Sizewell deals with the challenges facing the nuclear sector and the financing risks. So ongoing political support being uncertain, demand being uncertain, of course, market price volatility. I guess this maybe links a bit to your point about the impending white paper.
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe let's say something about that.
Yeah, I mean, we ourselves are agnostic as to how it's funded. If the government prefers a more taxpayer-led model, or it prefers a more consumer-led and finance model, either is fine by us. The in terms of demand, I mean, do we think that demand for electricity is going down? No, we don't. Do we think that the demand for low carbon heat is going down? No, we don't. So we don't think there's a demand risk. We think that there is a need for the nuclear to be much more flexible and respond to having a lot more intermittent power on the grid, and that's what we hope to do, partly, as I said, through the technology itself being inherently much more flexible than the old AGR technology, which is UK nuclear today, which is not flexible. But the EPR inherently is, and and by having the flexibility of using electricity both for heat and electricity, and by using the electricity both for the grid and for private wires and for hydrogen, etc., we hope to achieve quite a high level of flexibility and to work with the rest of the system.
Okay. So a question really about how, how do you put forward the argument that nuclear, given that, it's very, very complex to decommission, that waste is still a tricky issue, can compete with fully, in inverted commas, renewable options and, technology around that? Like what's your view and how do you position with the renewable sector on that?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that we shouldn't really see this as a competition. We need a huge amount of electricity, and there is room in this world for everything. And if you said is nuclear in competition, really it's not in competition with wind. It's in competition with the concept of long-term storage for wind lulls of the length which factually comprise the weather in the UK. So, and it's doing quite well in cost terms against long-term storage of that nature. But in terms of is it complex to decommission? The answer is no. I mean, decommissioning in the UK is perceived as complex because Sellafield represents decades, since the 1940s, of experimentation. It's complex because they don't know exactly what's there. A new nuclear power station like Hinkley and like Sizewell is designed to be decommissioned. So the parts are labelled. They have 3D models and virtual pictures of the whole thing. We have a very good understanding of how to decommission it. And within the price of the electricity is the price of the decommissioning and the management and long-term storage and disposal of nuclear waste. If you come on to how do the downsides of nuclear? So the downside of nuclear, as everybody knows, is nuclear waste. But nuclear waste is something which definitely has to be dealt with. But nuclear waste is small in volume. If you made your whole life's electricity from nuclear, you would use uranium around about the size of a Coke can, and then the waste product would be around about the size of a Coke can. And that's removed robotically. It's encased in concrete. Once it's in concrete, then you literally can't detect any radioactivity with a Geiger counter. You can go up and touch the concrete. So it's not this sort of vastly dangerous Simpsons-like green sludge, which people tend to imagine it is. And the truth about making electricity is there is no free lunch. I mean, nuclear, pretty much alone of generating technologies, takes full account of the cost of decommissioning and of all of the bad things of nuclear. They're all much publicised, and rightly so, and they're all taken account of. There are downsides to the use of rare earth minerals. There are downsides to the conditions in which those are mined. There are downsides to the fact you can't recycle solar. This is not to say nuclear is better than wind or solar. Absolutely not. But I think it's something which says that making electricity through other means has no adverse consequences for the planet, and comparing them with what are the adverse consequences of nuclear. The adverse consequences of nuclear are that you do need to deal with nuclear waste, but it's not ever harmed a human, nuclear waste. So it's much talked of, but it hasn't actually harmed anybody. I mean, the OECD stats on safety of electricity production have nuclear by some reasonable margin as the safest way of making electricity, bar none. But that's not a much publicised fact.
Lots more questions, but I think we're timing out. I'm going to ask one more, very topical. Can volatile government relations between the UK and China impact the viability of Sizewell CGN as a key stakeholder?
Government policy is all in everything that we do, and the George Osborne, David Cameron Conservative government, as I'm sure you know, had a golden era of relationships with China, and the relationship between EDF and CGN in the UK is a product of that era. This government is obviously not pursuing the policy of a golden era of relations, and the UK government has an absolute right to determine who are the foreign investors in nationally critical infrastructure, which includes nuclear, So CGN has a contractual option to take up to 20% of the shares in Sizewell as a purely financial investor. There's no Chinese tech, there are no Chinese workers on Sizewell. But whether or not CGN chooses to do so, and whether or not the UK government chooses to allow them to do so, is essentially a matter of geopolitics, which is well beyond my pay grade.
Nicely swerved, well done. Well, thanks very much, Julia. I think we've timed out. There's a few more questions. I'll try and kind of get some response offline from Julia for those at another time, because I can see there's a huge amount of interest. And I think I'd also like to mention, because I didn't in introducing Julia, that she actually pioneers inclusion for Sizewell C and for the energy industry, and ambassadors for EDF very, very passionately as well. So I'd like to commend you for that.
Yeah,
of course.
Go women. That's what it needs, more women.
Right, thank you. And I think I'm handing over to Angela to close. Is that right?
Hang on a minute. Take my microphone off, that would help. Okay, right, hello everybody. Gosh, that was really insightful, Julia. Thank you so much. Obviously a political topic as well as a hot topic, and there was so many questions, as Rebecca said. It was great, really, thank you so much. Very informative, and I think we learned a lot. I certainly did, that's for sure. So once again, thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us. As always, today's event will have been recorded, and so if there is anything in particular that you'd like to review, in particular Julia's answers, which I have to say were very detailed and great, so I'm sure you'd all like to go back and listen again to the information, the detail that's in there. So that'll be on our YouTube channel for you to be able to do that. And just very quickly, because I know that we're running out of time, I think Hayley's going to do a poll. Are you, Hayley?
Yep, I've got a poll ready to go with 3 questions in.
Right, so if she does the poll, and then I'll quickly tell you about our next event. And if you can do that poll, then when I finish talking to you about that, she can tell you what the results are. Now, after we've been catapulted, I would say, into home working, and the industry begins to emerge from the challenges of COVID-19, we can see that it has brought us many advantages, but it's also revealed some disadvantages. And I think it's important that we take stock of the past few months to understand the lessons that we've learned. So at our next event, which will be hosted by our sponsors, Energy Assets, we'll be talking about and reflecting on, I would say, and having a walk through this time and looking at what didn't work and what did work and how it's affected us. And we're going to be covering a little bit about our health and well-being, but there's also going to be somebody from employment law who will be discussing the legal issues related around that. So that will be on August 26th at 4 p.m. And Helen will be posting that as usual on LinkedIn, so keep your eye out from that. And where are we with the results, Hayley?
Still just waiting for a few more people to vote. I'm nearly there.
All right, okay. And so what I'll do is I'll highlight the meetings after that. The next date is the 23rd of September at 6 o'clock. When we'll be doing something on positive mindset, and then the one after that is the 28th of October, when we'll be covering electric vehicles and RS pod point contracts. So yeah, put those dates in your diary. Are we there, Hayley?
Yeah, we have 24 out of 27 people. So I will. Oh no, sorry, just had another one come through. Just at the last minute there. So I will end the polling now and share the results so everybody can get to see them. So best time to attend the meeting, because this has been a topic of conversation for a bit. Early evening over lunch is the key one. Obviously, presentation today. Majority of people saying incredibly useful, so great feedback, Julia. And then the networking as well. I know some of you came out the networking session saying it was a great and it was a good change. And there you go, majority of you, great, really enjoyed it, great, would like more time. So thank you very much for that feedback. It's really valuable.
Yeah, definitely. And that was a bit of a trial for us, because everybody, the feedback that we got was the biggest thing that they missed, that you've all missed from our events, is the networking. So that's great. Thank you very much. And we'll include that in our next meeting. So yeah, keep the date, and we all look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.